Alright, good morning YouTube. In today's video, we're going to go over my current workout program. But before we get into the video, if you would like to work with me as your own strength and muscle building coach, or would like to support the channel by buying merch, you can go to the link in the description below and support us there. But let's get into the video. So, in my last video, I kind of talked about how I structure a workout. I talked about the strength work, I talked about supplementary work, accessory work, and then the difference between isolation and compound movements, just to kind of give context for this video that I'm making right now and how I actually go about structuring my own workouts, how I go about structuring the workouts for other people. And let me like close some of the tabs here. Let's see, here we go. But yeah, so this video will kind of go over how I'm currently training, the way I kind of go about my progression, and to kind of flush out and provide context to all of the points that I made in the previous video. So let's get started with my first day of the week, my lower strength day. So here, what I kind of go about it, I kind of take a page out of the JTS or Juggernaut Training Systems book, while also applying things that I picked up from my coach Fast Lifts, as well as, let's say, ideas from like Andy Baker, and just kind of like going about it. Because here's the thing, you might think to yourself like, oh, that's a kind of weird like mix and combination, but it's just what I found works for me. It's what I found to be the best, or for me, the easiest to progress for me. So that's why I kind of go about it. So here I kind of put the deadlift, I deadlift conventional, and I do a top set. I do a top set, back offset kind of approach for my deadlift. Reason why I kind of like going about it this way is because the deadlift is very fatiguing and very taxing, and being able to replicate the same amount of work in multiple sets, doing sets across, is not all that feasible for me, at least for the main variation. Now, my deadlift is nothing to like write home about, in my opinion. Like, I'm deadlifting in the mid fives. So my best attempt was 550, hit it, 250 pounds body weight, and that's kind of where my deadlift is at right now. Like, I think that's a pretty decent number. But if I were to do, let's say, 495 for, but like my rep work just really isn't really all that good. I tend to have better top end strength results than I do being able to rep something out. So that's why for me, if I rep something out for one set, the likelihood that I'm going to be able to replicate that effort for a second or third set is very unlikely, unless I'm using very submaximal loads. In that case, I just think that I'm usually lifting weights that are kind of too far away from the heavy lift that I feel like I need to actually develop my strength. Or not develop my strength, because it's very effective. I'll kind of go over that in a future video. But you can definitely retain and build your top end strength if you do lower lower weight, high rep work. Can definitely work. It has worked for me. It's just for me personally, because I love deadlifting. It's something that I enjoy personally. Something that I really advocate for when it comes to your workouts is that you do things that allow you to stay the most consistent, that allow you to enjoy your training. So for me, I like lifting heavier loads, but I also understand the value of rep work. So that's why I use a top set. So here I have it listed as one set, so your top set, of 8, 5, or 3. If you look at programs made by Fast Lifts like the Tactician, this is his strength program. It's a very effective program. Ran it myself for a couple, I think for almost 2 months. My sense of time is horrible, but very effective program. But here, one thing that I kind of did with it is it's kind of not the same to say, and it's kind of difficult to put this in, at least here, usually when it comes to programs that I make for my clients, because this is the spreadsheet that I do give to clients when I am making their own workout programs. I include a tab labeled notes, and that's where I kind of like write down like what to expect in terms of progression, how to go about each session, and other important details. But I don't really have that here, just because it's my own personal workout program. At least just put into this. I use the Strong app to track my own training. But what I would do here is, let's say for the first 3 weeks, right? For 3 weeks, I would do I would do one set of 4 to 8 reps. So let's say I hit 4 reps in week 1, week 2 I hit 6 reps, and week 3 I hit 8 reps. It's not so much that I'm purposefully stopping myself week 1 at 4. It's just that my form would have broken down if I went for that 5th rep. And then by week 2, because of the recovery or because my body started to adapt, I am able to rep out 6 and then 8. It can go that way if it goes smoothly. Sometimes it's going to be more like, let's say 6, 7, and then 8, or 6, 6, 8, or 6, 6, 7. I've seen those are kind of things that kind of go on that I've seen it go through when I use very similar protocols such as this in the past. And that's just kind of how I go about it for the first 3 weeks. Then for the next 3 weeks after a deload, I'll do a top set for 2 to 5 reps. So let's say week 1, I hit it for 4. Week 2, I hit it for 5. I'll add weight, because since if I were to continue into next week and do another set of 5, I personally would much rather try to hit a slightly heavier load for 5 reps, or if I even get a little bit less work, even though the tonnage will decrease because the total number of reps I did is less, because I'm handling heavier weights, it'll just feed into future work down the road. Because one thing you have to keep in mind with this portion of the workout, this is my strength work, meaning you should try to focus on progression with the strength work and supplementary exercises by adding load if your goal is strength. That should be obvious, but with so much information out there, we kind of forget what is the goal of the exercise. What is the goal of the workout? This is my lower strength day. I'm trying to get stronger. How do I measure strength? My deadlift. What is strength measured by? The ability to do more reps or the ability to lift heavier weights? So what's going to benefit me in that goal? Lifting heavier weights. So that's why if I were to hit, let's say in that second block, 5 reps in week 2, I'd up the weight, and in week 3, let's say I only hit 3 or 4 reps, I'm still within that range of 2 to 5. I'm still making progress, at least in my book. And then I go down to the 1 to 3 rep range, and then I go back after another 3-week block or 4-week block if you include the deload, and I'll go back into my 4 to 8 range. So that's kind of how I go about the top set. For the back off work, so rather than just backing off with a single variation, I usually do a deadlift variation that I notice helps out a lot, or is a variation that I know will have good carryover, but also develop the musculature in a way that will keep me safe, allows me to use lighter loads, but still get a great training stimulus. And that's kind of what I go over in the previous video, talking about supplementary work. One way to kind of sneak in supplementary work or multiple kinds of supplementary work is to use variations right after the main work, right? Oftentimes, what I will advocate for is, let's say, for example, you have someone who's only doing deadlifts and barbell rows. If you were to tell them, okay, I want you to do deadlifts, stiff leg deadlifts, and barbell rows in the same workout, they would need to be a little bit more advanced so that way they can actually handle that work. They need to make sure that the musculature involved can handle that work. But if they're a novice, what I'd tell them is, let's say you have 3 sets of deadlift and 3 sets of barbell rowing. I would tell them, do deadlift for 1 set, like your conventional standard deadlift, and then 2 sets of a different variation, and then your 3 sets of barbell rows, and then add from there. So eventually this could go into something where if I were to become more specific with my deadlift, try to throw more sets on my deadlift, I can slowly build up over time. So that way it's not just so abrupt. I don't have to start so far back in terms of loading, and I can actually handle the workload. So that's kind of how this kind of plays into each other, right? But here I'll do a deadlift variation for 2 sets of 6 to 10 reps. This is meant to kind of build up the musculature, build in those reps, because rep work does help with strength. And also, let's say you are, pulling 500 pounds, and then you go down to, let's say, a 315 or 405 Romanian deadlift. That's still really hard work. It's not going to be easy whatsoever, but it's going to help develop your deadlift. It's going to help develop that strength, right? So for me, when I do the Romanian deadlift, it's nowhere within that range. Don't get me wrong. I'm right now like handling it at about 245 for the Romanian deadlifts, trying to build up, making sure each week I can actually just add weight but still stick within the range. Or I'll use another variation like a stiff leg deadlift, snatch grip deadlift. I usually try to stick with another barbell variation just because I don't want to have to switch around equipment all the time. That just adds more time into the workout, which I try not to do unnecessarily. So I'll try to stick to another barbell variation. And then that goes into the next work, which is the barbell row. So with the barbell row, I'll do 3 sets, 6 to 10, because if you are within the 6 to 10 rep range, it's going to be work that is heavy enough that helps facilitate strength, but it's also not going to elicit, like, let's say, the interference effect, which I think is kind of overblown. I do understand its necessity in being a programming consideration. Like, I'm not going to sit here and say you should max out or go to a rep max on deadlift and then do like 30 reps of barbell rowing. I'm not going to say that whatsoever. I'm not going to advocate that by any means. What I'm trying to say is that if it's heavy and it's not going to really be in that range, and if it's a strength day, you should be training heavy. So after that, that's going to be my supplementary work. So this is kind of like my supplementary work here. And these are two movements that I consider to be very beneficial to the main work. Because if you remember in that video that I talked about yesterday or the other day, here we have a movement that is going to directly target the same muscles and have high carryover to the deadlift. The barbell row is less so. It's a bit further in terms of specificity. However, it still builds up all the same structures. So in my eyes, and because the way I do the barbell row, at least on this day, it is a bit more like a deadlift row. It still has direct carryover. So these are my two supplementary movements, right? And then here, the leg press and then weighted chin up. So leg press, 4 sets, 8 to 12 reps, going for volume, and I'll do calf raises on the leg press just because, for one, I'm very prone to skip this. I don't really care about calves. I was morbidly obese for most of my life, so my calves got direct work for the first 16 years of my life. So my calves aren't really all that lacking, and also, in my opinion, it's not really a muscle I care about personally. So I am prone to skip it, but that's why if I were to do calf work, I would do it in a place where I'm already in the position to just do it conveniently, right? That's just me. Then I will go into weighted chin-ups. So weighted chin-ups, pull-ups, I do change my grip here. So weighted chin-ups for 2 sets, and then followed by just bodyweight chin-ups for 3 sets. And then I'll superset these with ab wheels or ab cable crunches. Reason why I have these sets spread out this way, right? I'm going to make another video talking about how I kind of like to distribute my volume. I kind of call it the 5-4-3-3 kind of way of going about things, just because I find that it's a very simple way of making sure that my volume it's fairly low. I am an advocate of low volume training. But I do advocate putting a lot of effort into each set, because I feel like with a lot of programs, they ask you to do a lot of sets, a lot of reps per set, with the intention of a couple things. Like, they just want to be scientifically minded. They want to market themselves as being science-based, and so they'll reference these studies that show higher volumes work well, and then they'll just throw a high volume approach at it. But then at the same time, like, you get into this weakness that allowed other channels that just try to simplify things in terms of just work harder than last time to kind of show up, right? So I feel like there is still that middle ground that can be made, where it's just work hard. That's the bottom line, whether or not it's with 5 sets or 3 sets, 1 set or 3 sets. If you work hard, the value of that set is going to be determined by the amount of hard work you applied, not by the number of sets. So I feel like that's kind of getting lost within a lot of our training nowadays. But anyway, the reason why it's kind of distributed in this way, right? I want you to kind of ask yourself something. If you, for your heaviest lift, for the lift that is you are doing the heaviest that day, how many sets could you realistically do and recover from? Probably not that much. The stronger you get, the less volume you can tolerate at higher workloads. So that's why usually within my own training, here I'll have my volume be pretty low, but because of the amount of effort that I'm applying, because of the weight that's being used, it kind of makes up for that deficiency, right? And then when it comes to these 2 exercises, it allows me to kind of target the muscles in a very non-specific way, and in a way that allows me to recover quickly. It allows me to train very, very useful muscles for the purposes of the deadlift. You're not going to tell. I really do think that for deadlift strength, you need strong quads and you need a strong back. And one of the best ways to build up strong quads is the leg press. Like, I'm a power builder, and I do think that the leg press has value when it comes to that. Now, reason being is because you can spare your lower back. And recoverability, the person who shows up healthy to the meet, who shows up healthy to their training, will likely be able to put in more effort. So if I'm able to get really good work capacity or work done with a less fatiguing movement, I'm going to do it. That's the purpose of accessory work. You want it to be something where you're already fatigued. This work is not easy. This work, usually what ends up happening is that this will take me about an hour, right? This will take me about 30 minutes. even with the rest intervals like included and everything like that, I'll usually be able to get all of this done within 30 minutes. But this will take a significantly longer just because I need a little bit more rest, just because I need a little bit more time to prepare, right? And if you are going to be selecting accessory movements that will require you to need that much more rest, I wouldn't really consider that to be the best accessory exercise for you, because accessory movements should be things where you can put in a lot of effort despite being fatigued. If I were to do, let's say, like back squats or maybe trap bar stuff or something of that nature, I would have to use a very light weight, and the only thing I'm really getting out of that is priming my technique, which, could be a good thing, but especially if you are trying to go into a more specific and more like, let's say, yeah, this is just a more specific point of your training where you like, let's say you're going into a meet or something of that nature where that becomes very important. Yeah, sure, maybe. But I would think that if it's like the kind of like off-season training further away from your goal, training further away from your new 100 max, from your competition, it's fine to be a little less specific, but still, you never want to throw something into your workout where you're not putting a lot of effort into it. So that's why 4 sets of 8 to 12, because even though I'm putting a lot of effort into it, you can recover from a set of leg press really, really easily, even if you're putting 5 plates up on there. And then same thing here, weighted chin-ups. Just do weighted chin-ups and then superset it with abs. I do 2 sets of weights, then 3 sets without weights. And even though I'm a hefty guy, 250, 255, I can still rep out with at least 25 pounds on my waist. My 100 max last time I tested was a 45-pound plate. But if you are a bigger guy, I highly recommend that you get good at the ability to do chin-ups, pull-ups, if your joints can handle it. Do what your joints allow you to do. In my opinion, from a muscle building and hypertrophy standpoint, yeah, lat pull down works really, really well, even assisted chin-ups and pull-ups. But for me, I feel like it's kind of like, let's say 2 people, right? One of them has never deadlifted in their life and one of them has only deadlifted. One of them can deadlift 405. The other person can max out his cable row, the cable row machine at his gym. Who are you going to ask to move a heavy ass couch or piano? I would be inclined to pick the 405 guy. Maybe that's not scientifically backed. Maybe there's no evidence to support this decision. But, if I had to make that choice on the spot, I'm going to pick the guy who I know lifts like that. So I feel like something similar is going on when it comes to chin-ups. Who are you going to think has a stronger back? Someone who has a really big back build from lat pull downs, or someone who has a really big back but is also hella strong because they built it with weighted chin-ups and so forth. So that was a long time spent on just day one. So let's go into day two. So day two, we have a very similar setup. I do another top set and then another back off set here. So right now for my back off set, I am using dumbbell bench pressing. Once I can do the dumbbell bench for 3 sets of 10 with 100 pounds, I'm going to go put the dumbbell bench into my second bench press day, not in my first one. The thing is, like right now, I can do the 100-pound dumbbells for about like maybe 4 to 6 reps, but I want to get it up to like sets of 10 or more, and then that's when will put it into the size day, because it'll kind of enter into that threshold, right? But same thing, top set, back off set, because when it comes to your strength work, there needs to be some type of form of progression. That's going to be the kind of defining factor or defining characteristic of your strength days. There needs to be some type of tangible method of progression there. Now that's very similar in terms of the size days, but I feel like progression there can be a bit more loose, and progression is never going to leave just because one day is a strength day and one day is a size day. It just kind of shows itself differently, and I'll go over that soon. Then I go into the overhead press. I do 3 sets of 5. I'll try to stick with a weight that I could maybe do 8 reps with, but I'll try to stick it with this 5. So this is kind of where RPE can kind of be a bit more useful. I don't really program it in there just because I don't think it's the most useful tool to use personally. But just to make sure I'm not overworking myself, just to make sure I'm not like burning myself out, I try to make sure that since I'm doing a 3x5 and I'm just adding weight linearly, I will stick with a weight if I feel like the RPE can be brought down over the next couple weeks. So let's say, for example, I did it with 155 last week. If for whatever reason that last set was just disproportionately harder than I would like it to be, I'm just going to repeat that weight until I feel like I've mastered it. That's really all it is. Maybe like another thing that you can do here is like do some backloading. So you do 2 sets of 5 and then on the AMRAP on the last set. And then once you hit a certain number of reps on the last set, then you can add weight. That's another way to kind of go about it. It's just try to make sure that there is something to go forward with it, right? And then here, very similar progression to my chin-ups, but I do use machine rows, whether it be the hammer strength machine row or the cable machine. I try to do something chest supported just because of the amount of beating my back got the day before. But here it is kind of that, this is where the high volume approach becomes beneficial in my opinion. So we know that if you have two people, right, who are training far from failure, or relatively far from failure, and one group does 5 sets and one group does 3 sets, the person who did, sorry, allergies, the person who did 5 sets will get better results. They'll get better hypertrophy results. So this is kind of where I kind of pull this out, right? I can't put in as much effort as I did the day before, or even like at that current time because I did another set of chin-ups, right? So at this point in time, because I am training further from failure, I'm going to compensate and adjust for that by increasing the amount of volume that I'm doing and doing 5 sets. So there's that there. And then here, as many reps as possible, just trying to go from there. So let's say I can do my weighted dips for about 10 reps, then I'll add weight. Is just these arbitrary things where it's just like, for a certain amount of time, you're chasing for, like, let's say 1 more rep. And then once you kind of get into a number of reps that are just like a bit too high, you add load that brings the reps back down, you build up again, and then you just repeat that process. That is how simple training can be. And for whatever reason, people like to invoke the gods of bro science, if that makes sense, to make sure it's like, well, is the time under tension there? Am I feeling the pump or something like that? It's just like, are you getting stronger? Like, this is what I mean when in all my videos, like, are you getting stronger? Because when I talk about strength training, they think I'm just talking about this. No, I'm talking about that here too. Like, I'm just trying to add weight onto my weighted dips after I do a shit ton more reps than I could before. Let's say I'm doing 25 pounds on my waist for a weighted dip, and I go from 5 reps to 10 reps. Did I get stronger? Yes. Do I want to continually adding reps when I'm like repping out 10? Probably not. Me personally, I prefer going into slightly lower rep ranges, maybe that 5 to 10 range for most of my work. So what am I going to do? What am I going to do to stay there? Add weight. And for me, I just find that to be useful. Now for you, the way that reveals itself is going to be kind of dependent on you. But what is not going to be independent is the need to get stronger. So think about that. Then I'll go into bicep curls, barbell tricep extensions, and upright rows. And I usually just kind of cycle these through. I don't really take rest in between each one. Like I might kind of just take like 3 to 5 deep breaths, shake out my arms a little bit, and then go back into it. But generally speaking, after I just go from barbell curls to tricep extensions to upright rows, all one after the other, shake out my arms a bit, repeat. So it's kind of like a circuit there. So if you look here, right, the dip can build up the bench. I'm not saying it doesn't. And I've known people who have said that the dip has carried over to their bench a lot, but it's not like a direct bench variation, right? It really is usually a supplementary or accessory work. So that's why I put it there. For the overhead press, some people will argue that the overhead press is not a movement that has a lot of carryover to the bench press. So as a supplementary exercise, I include it as something totally separate. 1 second, let me take a quick break. All right, I've returned. All right, so here for the supplementary work, it's like I said, very similar to how you would load or progress on your main work. But I personally like the overhead press. I do understand why in some situations you would actually take it out of your program. And when I kind of go into, let's say, a peaking variation of this program, I do remove the overhead press. But when it comes to like developmental phases, when it comes to like muscle building phases, I keep that shit in there for the sole reason that I like it. And usually I do find that the overhead press benefits from more reps. So I really wouldn't like try to go less than 5 reps on an overhead press. So that's why I keep that there. All right, let's go into the size days. So for the size days, a couple things that kind of like are differentiating factors between the strength days and size days is the fact that, I mentioned my 5-4-3-3 kind of approach to strength days. So let's say, it's deadlifting, right? 3 sets of deadlifting, 3 sets of rows, 4 sets of leg press, 5 sets of chin ups. For a beginner, it would probably be something more like 5 sets of deadlift, 4 sets of leg press, 3 sets of cable rows, and then 3 sets of whatever back extension, hamstring curls, whatever. Right? That's a very like novice friendly way of kind of going about that kind of set distribution, right? But here's the thing: the reason why I advocate that for strength work is because when it comes to training for strength, I am a believer that you should focus on less exercises and more sets per exercise. Obviously, that mindset does fall apart when you get super fucking strong. At least it does, in my opinion, when it comes to the goal of power building, not just pure strength. Because if it comes to pure strength, that's totally different. But that's why I kind of hear like 5 sets here, 4 sets here, kind of reversed it, right? But when it comes to bodybuilding, I am a fan of increasing the number of exercises that you do. But here's the thing: there's a couple ways to increase training volume, right? So tonnage being sets times reps times weight. Volume is just sets and reps. How do you increase sets and reps? You can just increase them by themselves. So you go from 3 sets to 5 sets. You go from 8 reps to 12 reps, or you can add more exercises. Now, for me personally, even when I add exercises, I don't really like adding more sets into the workout. For me personally, I don't really like the idea of you go each week adding a set in most cases. It can be done. There's ways to do it. There's ways to do it effectively. But letting that be a marker of progression, letting that be a method or mechanism of progression, in my opinion, isn't really the best idea. So let's say week 1, you do 2 sets. Week 3 or week 2, you do 3 sets. Week 4, you do 4 sets. There are ways to make that work. I'm not the biggest fan of it. I know that's kind of like the RP style of going about it, where you just increase the number of sets and increase the number of sets you're taking to failure, possibly. Like, I hope I'm understanding that correctly. But I'm not the biggest fan of that personally. I would much rather kind of stick to a very similar amount of volume, because it's an amount of volume I know for a fact I can recover from. And just like I mentioned earlier, put as much work as I possibly can in those sets. So here we have the squat, the good morning, and dumbbell row. These are going to be the 3 heaviest movements of the day. These are the movements that I'm trying to push the most amount of work on, and I'm trying to take these movements as close to failure as possible with a respectable amount of weight, like a moderate amount of weight, but still trying to go there, right? So set 1, maybe I'll hit 20. Set 2, maybe I'll stop at 15. Set 3, I'll stop around 10 or 12, or 15 again. We'll see. It just kind of depends on the day, how much I'm mentally there to push myself, but you should always be trying to push yourself, because for me, my squat is horrendous, and so is my work capacity. And there's a couple ways, at least at the current moment, I'm starting to incorporate running again, but I do want to improve my work capacity a bit more. And one of the best ways, in my opinion, to do that is just more squats. Quite honestly, it's just a great tool to build up that work capacity while still building up your deadlift, while still building up your squat, while still building up your legs. So that's kind of what I go there. Once I can hit if I can hit 3 sets of, if I can hit a set of 20 and then stay within the range with a certain weight of 10 to 20, right? I will add weight. So let's say week 1, you start out with 135, you hit a set of 20, a set of 18, and a set of 15. Next week, you'll go up to 145. You hit that for maybe 15, 12, 11. You stay at that weight, and then it isn't until you hit 20 again. It's a very simplistic way of going about things, but it works. Oftentimes, what you need is not a program where it's just like, okay, week 1, I'm gonna hit this weight for this reps for whatever, or something like that, right? And week 2, you do this. So here's the thing: the problem with that way of thinking is, what happens when you don't hit that number week 1? You either started too high, you underestimated the effect of other aspects of your workout. And that's why I'm kind of against programming like that, because when you program it in such a way where effort does become a variable that you have to measure, you're going to kind of see what, and kind of make guesses about what things affect other training sessions. So let's say, for example, like machine rows, right? Or no, not machine rows. Let's say deadlift and squats, right? If I squat day 1 versus if I put squats at the end of the program, how does that affect me? If I do 5 sets of deadlift, does that affect my workout later down the line when I have to do 3 sets or 5 sets of squats? You can make those adjustments. You can make those notes in your program if you just kind of go based off that. But if you kind of like tell yourself, okay, I have this 16-week program and I know exactly what numbers to hit for all 16 weeks. For me personally, that's useful. That is a great way of programming. That's a great way of training. However, what ends up happening with most people is the fact that they just don't have the patience to start where you actually need to start. And that's usually where this thing kind of falls apart. Where usually if you kind of have something where you know you're starting light, you know you're starting easy, because when it comes to strength training, starting out easy is an important part of strength training, not so much bodybuilding, but when it comes to priming the nervous system, developing strength, you do need to kind of start light. You can kind of still do that, but still put in a lot of effort. And this kind of progress based on the amount of effort that you're able to give, because at that point you're only progressing when your body has actually been able to recover from what you can do. Then we go into the good morning. So I right now I'm not doing as much frequency with a lot of my main work, with the exception of the bench press, just because the bench can still take that frequency. When it comes to the squat and deadlift, right now it is at just 1 time per week. For the longest time, it used to be like 2 times a week squat, bench, dead, and then 1 time a week overhead press. That was like how I trained for like a majority of my training career. But right now, I'm finding that I just can't recover from it as well as I could have. And in my opinion, I think that's just because I'm getting stronger. I'm lifting objectively heavier weights than I was then, for all 3 lifts, you know, like not just one or the other. Like, and like that that is something that I'm now having to manipulate, now that I consider myself to be like the weakest of strong people. And that's just kind of it's kind of a way to just make sure that I always stay hungry, I guess. But that's the topic for another video. Who cares about that kind of mindset stuff right now? All right, but then dumbbell rows. So here I'm still trying to pick like a pretty heavy load. So I'm doing like maybe around like 75 to 90 pound dumbbells, and just trying to row it. So you could say that this is more like a croc row, but it's still fairly high rep. Then I'll go over to the Smith machine or the hack squat and just do hack squat. Like 2 sets to failure here, and then 2 sets to failure on a hamstring curl, and then 2 sets to failure with this kind of superset right here. So this is still 15 sets. This is 15 sets. So I'm doing, the amount of volume that I'm doing is about equal across each day, but where that volume is going is spread out among different amounts of exercise depending on the day. This is a strength day. It doesn't make sense to do a shit ton of different exercises on a strength day, in my opinion. It makes more sense to do that on a hypertrophy focused day or a size day. So now let's look at the size upper, or the upper size day. So if you notice here, I don't have a deadlift variation. I do have a hinge variation, the good morning, and the hinge does help build up the hamstrings and the hips and the low back and the spinal rectors, but I'm using such a light weight that is nowhere near as fatiguing or taxing. But here we have a rack pull or a block pull, and this is where I kind of get more upper back work, helps with the lockout strength, and also it just puts a lot more time between the deadlift. So here so this is usually about Monday. This is my Tuesday. I take a rest day. This is Thursday, and then Friday here. Then I have 2 days of rest, and then that's usually enough time for me to feel good again with the deadlift, because the deadlift, my low back is not taking anything heavy in this day. There's nothing really like frying my low back on this day. There's a little bit of upper back work being done with the rack pull, and it is like, you know, because I am lifting pretty heavy weights, there is that to contend with. But I do find that it actually helps, not hurts me personally. So when I go into this day after 2 days of recovery, my deadlift is fine and my low back is more than recovered. Especially because the last time I really hit my low back directly was here. So that's why I kind of like stagger it there, just so that way there's more time between the deadlift and, let's say, another deadlift variation or another movement that loads my spine as heavily. Then here, bench press, 3 sets of as many reps as possible. One of my side goals is to be able to do 225 for about 30 reps. Right now my best is 18, so we're getting there. So yeah, just usually I load up 225, try to go for as much as I can. Then I hit 205, as many as I can, 185 for as many as I can. I do take rest in between and I go from there. I kind of move things around, so like things are out of order right now, but rack pull is the second movement because it's the second heaviest movement of the day. and then followed by barbell overhead press and chin-ups. Here it's 10 to 15, not 3 to 5, because what I usually do is, like, let's say maybe 80% of whatever this weight is, and I'll still stick with it to be a fairly easy movement, just so that way it's still something that you can recover from. It's still enough to elicit growth. Now, like I said, one trade-off between um, putting a lot of effort versus kind of like sandbagging a little bit is that you are going to get less results. And that's why I'm usually averse to advocating methods that just make you work less hard, right? However, there are moments in the program where that's a bit beneficial, where it's just like, okay, I'm doing enough to stimulate strength and muscle growth. It's probably not the most optimal amount of strength and muscle growth, but it's enough to just stimulate it, and then I'll go from there. For me, I find that to be just as beneficial. Then seated rows and tricep extensions as a superset because they're just right next to each other. Chest fly and reverse fly as a superset because it's on the same machine. And then dumbbell bicep curls and dumbbell lateral raises or Lou raises. I put that there as well. And 2 sets to failure because usually what I'll end up doing is I'll usually add something here that's an intensification technique. I don't really put that in on my strength days just because my recovery and my intensiveness is just put onto the load that I'm using that day. But here I'll have something like I usually do something like a drop set here, and then here I'll usually do something like myo reps, and then same thing here. I'll just do like either run the rack or myo reps. Those are my two kind of favorite ways of going about things. There is a way where you, like with the Christian Thibodeau method, where it's kind of like using like the negative, and me personally, I never found that to be the most like engaging. I can't make a judgment based on its efficacy or its effectiveness. All I can say is I personally get bored as hell doing that kind of stuff, so I don't want to do it. So that's why I usually stick to drop sets and myo reps when it comes to the rep work here. But still, 15 sets here. So, I do 15 sets per workout. So 60 sets a week because I'm only training with weights 4 days a week. So my volume is on the low side, but I kind of prefer that because that lets me have the ability to put a lot of effort in per set. It keeps the length of my workouts down to a manageable level, and I'm still seeing results week to week. So until I need to add volume, I don't. And usually I find that even doing like maybe 12 sets of workout, it usually works just as well. Usually it's kind of like 12 sets of workouts, 18 sets per workout is kind of like where I like to stay personally, just because of the amount of time investment you're putting in for each new set. Remember, for every set that you add, that's more time under load, and that's more time you need to take to rest, and then more time it takes to set up. Now, if you have literally nothing else that you need to do for your day, yeah, sure, train. That's what I would love to do. That's what I'm trying to do in one of these days, where like I can just train. But if you are a working professional, if you have other responsibilities, like I know it doesn't really seem like that much for some people, but sometimes those minutes do add up, and you do need that time in your day. So, you know how Arnold says, sleep faster? There are ways to work out faster too, but without sacrificing any benefits to your workout program. And this is kind of how I went about it. So if you have any questions about how I train, have any questions about other methods that I went through within this workout, you can go to my previous video, or you can just get into a discussion with me. Message me on Instagram. I am planning to open up a Discord server for the entire channel. And then also, if you would like to work with me, get your own spreadsheet where you get your own workout program with similar methods, with a similar mindset of progression and effort, then reach out to me on the link below. So thank you so much for watching. My name is Carlos the King, StansRain.com, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.